Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Right now, literally as we speak, there are massive cargo ships navigating the oceans, crewed by teams representing a dozen different nationalities. Look, the modern shipping industry is an absolute marvel of globalization, but putting all those radically different backgrounds onto one isolated vessel, well, that's really just the beginning of the story. Today, we're going to unpack the absolutely critical management of maritime cultural diversity.
Let's kick things off with a pretty massive question, because understanding this unique environment is the key to transforming a potential disaster into a high-performing team. Think about your typical office environment for a second. Now imagine you can't just clock out and leave that office at 5 p.m. Imagine your office is surrounded by thousands of miles of open ocean, and your coworkers are suddenly your roommates, your dining companions, and your emergency response team, all rolled into one. Seriously, what happens when the whole world has to live and work on that one single ship?
Okay, here's our roadmap for today. We're going to hit the reality of maritime diversity, the risks of cultural miscommunication, defining multicultural diversity competency, the sheer power of cultural training, how to actually lead a diverse crew, and wrap up with the global diversity advantage.
Section 1. The reality of maritime diversity. Setting the scene here, we have to recognize that the modern maritime industry is deeply, inherently globalized.
A ship is a super unique, dynamic environment. A diverse crew doesn't just work together, they literally live together 24/7. This isn't just a workplace, it's a floating micro-society. You're dealing with different daily habits, different diets, different religions, and totally different social norms, all packed into a highly confined space for months on end.
Which brings us to Section 2, risks of cultural miscommunication. Because what happens when that floating micro-society completely lacks a shared cultural understanding?
Look, without intervention, cultural and linguistic differences aren't just your standard HR headaches. They directly create hazardous conditions and critical maritime safety risks. Imagine a major crisis happening down in the engine room. If crew members are hesitating because of communication barriers or maybe hierarchical misunderstandings based on their cultural backgrounds, that delay can literally be catastrophic. Misinterpretations lead to conflict, and conflict severely damages morale, stripping away the exact support that leadership absolutely needs to keep the vessel safe.
Section 3, defining multicultural diversity competency. To fix these dangerous risks, we need to get our toolkit established, starting with some clear definitions. First up, cultural diversity. Simply put, this is just the baseline reality of having all these different backgrounds present in one location. It's just a fact. It's the physical presence of different races, religions, languages, and traditions side by side on the deck of a ship. But, and this is a big but, having diversity is absolutely not the same thing as making it work.
Now, here is the crucial shift, moving from just having diversity to actively managing it. Multicultural diversity competency means actively respecting and communicating across those boundaries. It's a real, actionable skill. It's the ability to look past a cultural difference, understand exactly where your crewmate is coming from, and figure out how to actually collaborate with them effectively.
And the way we build that competency? Cross-cultural training. This specifically targets how our cultural backgrounds influence our work and decision-making on board. This type of training doesn't just tell everyone to be nice. It digs deep into how national culture shapes our perceptions of management, like why one culture might openly question a captain, while another views doing that as strictly taboo.
Section 4. The power of cultural training. Let's look at the actual data and see how this training fundamentally transforms a crew.
The contrast here is honestly staggering. Without training, a multicultural team is highly prone to connectivity problems and massive misunderstandings, creating a super high potential for conflict. But with it, cross-cultural training acts as this critical safety parameter. It integrates the team, ensures members actually understand and properly interpret each other under intense pressure, and it radically drops the rate of onboard conflict. Night and day difference.
Building on that, the training completely flips the team dynamic from defensive distrust to an engaged, highly task-oriented unit. When a crew is untrained, ethnocentrism, the belief that one's own culture is superior, can easily take root. And that just leads to sheer inefficiency because people are clashing instead of working. But apply that training and you get mutual trust, massive flexibility, and a team that is sharply concentrated on executing their tasks safely.
Section 5. Leading a diverse crew. So, knowing the ROI is great, but how do we actually get there as leaders?
Well, training has got to tackle the specific realities of shared living. It has to teach conflict management explicitly tailored for multicultural groups. But crucially, it's got to cover self-cultural awareness. Before you can understand others, you have to recognize your own biases. Gaining this deep cultural awareness is exactly what diffuses the intense psychological stress of functioning in a confined, multinational pressure cooker on board. It turns the unknown into the understood.
To actually manage this floating micro-society, leaders need a clear checklist of skills. It's not nearly enough to just bark orders. Leaders have to exhibit fair attitudes, deep self-awareness, an acute understanding of linguistic differences, and honestly, the humility to actually learn from the different cultures beneath their command.
Section 6, the Global Diversity Advantage. Once we apply these leadership skills and get that training rolling, the narrative changes entirely, from just mitigating risk to unlocking massive potential. This reveals the ultimate payoff. A well-managed, diverse workforce directly boosts economic and social performance. In a globalized economy, shipping companies that master this gain a massive competitive edge. A culturally competent team adapts so much faster to changes. Because they bring totally different viewpoints to the table, they help each other become vastly more creative, driving a much higher potential for real problem-solving and innovation out on the water.
A unified, diverse team doesn't just operate a ship safely, they bring creative problem-solving and a truly global perspective to every single challenge they face. When they are properly trained and led, those differences in background aren't points of friction anymore. They become different tools in a shared toolbox, making the whole crew stronger, more resilient, and far more capable.
I want to leave you with this provocative thought to take back and apply to your own workplace. Putting people from different backgrounds in the same room, or the same ship, is just diversity. Equipping them to understand, respect, and leverage those differences to achieve incredible things, that is competency. So, I have to ask, is your team just diverse, or are they culturally competent? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and we will see you next time.